Welcome to the Greg Bennett Show. I'm your host, Greg Bennett, and today I have a wonderful conversation with Dr. Dan Plews. Dan is one of the world's greatest minds in endurance sport. Plus, he has the practical and personal experience on top of the science. He's a true self-experimenter. In this episode, Dan describes everything there is to know about heart rate variability, and he discusses low carbohydrate, high healthy fat diet, and he discusses how he coaches his athletes by first looking at the event and what it takes to be successful in that event, then the individual and what their strengths and weaknesses are, and then what training best fits. Dan shares some entertaining stories of some of the training of the power athletes in the Team Emirates New Zealand America's Cup crew and how a 4-minute time trial for men that are raw power may have been just a little bit too far. This episode had me laughing at times and then jotting down incredible knowledge at others, and I was entertained for the full 90 minutes. Now, some housekeeping before we go on. I know I've said it before, but if you're enjoying the show, you'd be doing me a huge favor if you could subscribe and maybe give me a review on Apple Podcasts. That would really be wonderful. Please keep the feedback coming on social media channels, and you can find the show notes, the timestamps, the coupon codes, and links at bennettendurance.com/media. I hope you enjoy this one as much as I did. And remember, success comes to those who endure just one moment longer. I'm so grateful for the continued support of the show from these incredible sponsors. You really do need to have these products in your life. Personally, I use each of them daily. Athletic Greens nutritional beverage, Hyperice recovery tools, and the glutathione supplement Continual G. What I love about Athletic Greens is its simplicity. It's delivered straight to your door and it takes seconds to mix with water. It tastes great and goes down easy. And I know I'm getting the most comprehensive nutritional beverage on the planet in one quick drink. If you're looking for one product that has as much high quality nutrients in it as possible, then you want to consider Athletic Greens. Athletic Greens is more than just a multivitamin and multimineral. It takes it to the next level, adding a daily dose of superfoods, probiotics, greens blend, and more to support the gut health, energy, immunity, and stress. And right now, Athletic Greens is giving you, my audience, a special offer on top of their all-in-one formula. You'll receive 1 year supply of vitamin D and 5 travel packs for free with your first purchase for additional immune support. Many of the population are vitamin D deficient, including myself. I focus heavily in getting in the sun throughout the day, but when I can't, I religiously supplement with vitamin D. Adding vitamin D to your daily routine is just a great way to support vitamin D production. So if you're looking to get more out of your multivitamin and invest in your immunity, energy, and gut health, then you'll struggle to find anything more comprehensive than Athletic Greens. Take ownership of your health today and receive comprehensive nutritional insurance, a free year supply of vitamin D, and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase by visiting athleticgreens.com/Greg. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Greg. Now, you'll hear me mention Normatec and Hypervolt from Hyperice in several of the conversations with my guests in this show. Many of my guests and I are using these recovery tools religiously. You really must have them in your house. Sit in a pair of Normatec boots at the end of a long day. Use the Hypervolt percussion massage device to warm up muscles and loosen hot spots before working out or anytime you have a niggling injury. They're just so easy and they're so quick and they work. Their vibrating foam rollers, thermal technology, and Normatec compression systems just help you warm up faster, recover quicker, and simply move better. Seriously, these products are the perfect Christmas gift for any family member or good friend. Get $50 off all percussion devices now, no code needed, and get an additional 10% off with code GREG10 at hyperice.com. That's hyperice.com, HYPERICE.com, and use code GREG10 for 10% off. I have a web address for all of my listeners who already know that 1, the human body makes the most powerful antioxidants on earth. 2, the master antioxidant your body cells make is called glutathione, and the human body needs glutathione to live. 3, the reason I'm addressing a select group of listeners with this web address is that once you see what these scientists in my hometown Sydney have accomplished, it'll blow your mind. Go check out continualg.com, continualg.com. That's CONTINUALG.com. Check it out and let them know that I told you about it. All right, today's guest is a doctor of exercise physiology, a world champion Ironman athlete, a coach, and founder of endureIQ. His athletic accomplishments are extraordinary. He won the 2018 age group Ironman World Championship and was the first non-professional athlete to finish and set an age group world record of 8 hours and 24 minutes. What's incredible about that is he did it while still working full-time as a sports scientist and coach. He's worked with professional triathletes Tim Van Berkel, Jan Van Berkel, Carol and Steffen, and Terenzo Bozzone, and that list just keeps going on. He's also working with the New Zealand America's Cup sailing team. I've been really looking forward to having on the show one of the world's greatest minds in endurance sports. He has the practical and personal experience, and he has the science. So welcome, and thanks for joining me on the Greg Bennett Show. Dr. Dan Plews, how are you, mate?
Oh, really good. Wow, what an introduction. It almost gave me goosebumps.
Well, you're welcome, mate. I think one of the things I like to do in this show is recognize, the guests when they come on and what you've done. I just think the way that you've taken science and you've self-experimented and shown that it works is really quite extraordinary. And that's why I was really excited to have you on the show, because I feel like you have so much knowledge we can all learn from. So I really appreciate that. But what I want to do now, there's so many things that we can learn from you in terms of performance and health and wellness and all of that. But before we really get going, I'd love to just see if we could just wind the clock back a bit, get to know you a little bit. And so why don't we just start with, when did you find your passion for endurance sports?
Oh, yeah. Well, I actually started doing my first ever swim run event when I was 9 years old. So I've been in the game a very long time. We might have even started doing this multi-sport thing at the same time, Greg. You never know, around about the same time. So
mid-80s.
yeah, it would have been. Well, it would have been early 90s for me. Yeah. So I guess I started then, and it all came from my dad. My dad was a cyclist, but then he took up triathlon, and you just follow him around. I guess I started off when I was running. He was running, and he'd be training for marathons, and I'd ride my bike next to him, and then it would get to the point where I would he'd be then cycling and I'd be cycling with him, and it just kind of grew from there. And I still absolutely love it, and I just can't get enough of. I love exercising. I still love training. I'm still really passionate about everything to do with endurance sports. So that's when it really kicked off. So and I never stopped really.
Did you ever feel, I just mentioned in that the 8 hours 24, which is just, that would have won it for most, that would have won Kona Ironman for probably the 30 years before the last 5 to 10 years. So, it really was an extraordinary time. You obviously have some true athletic ability. Was there ever a point where it was like, maybe it could be a profession, or was it, tell me about that.
Yeah, definitely. I don't really think I know I'm not the most massively physiologically gifted athlete in the world, but there's definitely people with bigger engines than me. But I have some things that are more suited towards long distance triathlon, and I really believe that if I had taken up the long distance pursuit a little bit earlier in my life, I may have had a crack at being professional for a while. But I started off as a youth and a junior, and I was a national youth champion in 1998. And at that point in time, I really did want to be professional. And I was and this is a bit of kudos to you, Greg. I was massively inspired by you. And it's funny because one of the reasons was I always felt like I was kind of struggling. I felt like I was a little bit of a bigger kind of athlete. And I looked at you and I think, well, this Greg Bennett guy, I always felt that me and you were similar size and shape. For some reason, and I just really thought, God, well, and you were literally my idol. And I have to say, the when you won in 1999 the World Cup in Sydney, I've watched that race at least 30 to 40 times on a VCR video as well. I used to rewind it and watch it, and I still remember it because I remember you wearing. I think it was like a rival. Two-piece, I just remember that on the hills you were just absolutely ripping it, and I was just amazed. And you still ran. I mean, even remember the time you ran. You ran a 31:57 to be precise.
Did I really?
Yeah.
That is awesome, and you've actually, thank you so much. That's very, very kind of you, and it actually, now you've just given me goosebumps, because that was when I look back at my career, that '99 Sydney World Cup was really somewhat of a career highlight, and not just because of the win and that kind of thing, but it was one of those performances that everything kind of came together. It's very rare to walk away from. I think I've got maybe 3 or 4 out of close to 500 races where I can kind of go, man, that one, I almost got that completely right. The swim was great, the bike was great, and the run was great. So thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate it. And being a bigger guy, I know what you mean. I spent a lot of my career kind of a little bit conscious of that. But I've even said on this show, I look back and I remember, certain photos, even thinking, oh, I'm fat, don't take my photo. And I look back now and I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I may have had a bit of a body image issue, but especially from those 90s. And then I certainly leaned up a lot more after that. But when did you decide then, being that you're kind of obviously hungry about the sport and had a great desperation for the sport, was there a moment where you were like, okay, it's actually the science and the coaching that I truly love? What was that transition?
Yeah, I guess it was just more of a gradual transition. So, I was at Loughborough University, and at the time I was at Loughborough University, there was like Will Clark was kind of that kind of era. Will Clark, Ollie Freeman, and I was quite a few years older than them, and they started coming through, and I'm like, wow, these guys are a lot faster. I'm like, okay, this isn't really going to happen. So I kind of finished my degree. And then I got a scholarship, a coaching scholarship, to do a master's degree at the University of Leeds, where Alistair Brownlee was and Johnny Brownlee were at the time, and they were juniors. So I'm from Yorkshire, and so me and Alistair grew up in the very similar area. In fact, Alistair, my brother was a few years ahead of him, but my brother went to the same school as Alistair. So I was like coaching Alistair as an assistant coach with Jack Maitland at the time, and then that's another reiteration to know that you shouldn't be doing Olympic distance triathlon when those two are on the scene. And Alistair was like 17 at the time, and I'm like, what's going on with this guy?
Mate, they retired many of us, don't we?
Yeah. If there wasn't already a nail in the coffin of me thinking I had to go at Olympic distance, that was definitely the final one. Not only is Alistair just bombing it up and down, he had I think his brother was like 15 at the time, and I'm like, whoa, these two are next level. So and that year, Alistair won the World Junior Championships for the first time. And I guess until that point, I was very much like, very focused on training, and I had loads of great experiences. I lived with Paul Amy for a long time, and I was pretty much his training hack in the lead up to Athens before. And we were out training I was the guy he was with in Italy when he had the accident and broke his pelvis. So we were out on a training ride and we were coming down this hill, and I'm like, well, what's Paul doing? He's taking friggin' ages coming down this hill. So I'm waiting at the bottom, and then he comes rolling down, and he's like, I'm a bit of an idiot. I've, fallen off. And so I ended up dragging him back to the campsite, and we didn't really know what was going on. And that happened. So, so that was a point at which I was trying to make it, but never really happened. And then went to the Leeds, Brownlees, and got really into my masters. And that was the first time that I kind of went into really realize that science was the thing that I was really passionate about, and just understanding. I have just a thirst for knowledge and a thirst for understanding the mechanics of human performance, I guess. So.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? I think there's a lot of us, some are fortunate to maybe get a slightly bigger VO2 or whatever. And I came through a generation where you could probably get away with a lot more than you can now, certainly at the Olympic distance. Now I feel like the Olympic distance guys are all freaks and hard work, whereas back then we had the freaks, but they were often lazy, and then we just had the hard workers like myself. But it was kind of a bit of a mix. But we all have this love for optimizing what we have, and I think you've made that very evident in the way that you've carried on, and you've gone into the world of sports science. So the next steps, who are your big influences then moving on to, where you are now?
Yeah, so I guess that finishing where we left off there. My I went to Leeds, and then from Leeds, I got a job working as a triathlon coach in Singapore. So I must have been about 23, 24. So I left the UK, moved to Singapore, and I was basically a triathlon coach for a company called Tribob, which was basically it's expat coaching for age groupers pretty much. But it was a fun job. We went around Asia, we had training camps, and I hosted training sessions every day. And then I did about a year in that, and then I moved from there to my first kind of pure sports science job, where I was a physiologist for the Singapore Sports Council, where I was in charge of all the Southeast Asian game sports, primarily endurance focused, cycling, triathlon, running. And at the time, I created my own cycling team called the OCBC Singapore Continental Cycling Team, and they actually went on to be a pro continental team, which was big at the time. I got funding, got $100,000 sponsorship from OCBC Bank, ran that cycling team. And one of the guys from that actually took the white, where he held the white jersey for a period in the Tour of Langkawi. So it was, that was quite a successful project. So that's kind of the Singapore base. And then from there, I then met who's now my still very, very good friend. He was best man at my wedding. That's how close we were. Professor Paul Lawson in Singapore. And he's 15-time Ironman finisher, absolute endurance frother like me. And we had so much in common, science, triathlon. We just hit it off like a house in fire. He got a job working for High Performance Sport New Zealand, the Olympic program in New Zealand. And then he said, I really want to bring you over. So he brought me over basically on a PhD scholarship, came over, started the PhD scholarship under him. But then after about maybe 2 months, I then got a job working as a physiologist for the New Zealand Olympic rowing team. And that's how the whole thing kind of then went off. And I was with the New Zealand rowing team for 8 years, went to Rio, went to London with them. And and that's how it all came off, finished my PhD, and now I'm still active. I've got more, I think about 40 publications now in the area of sports science and whatnot, supervise many students and keep my foot in the game with a bit of coaching and practical application of the sports science with other sports as well. So, yeah.
I love all of that. I love that you've got you've got so many variables there that all come together. So you've got being the athlete, you've been the coach, you've been somewhat of a coach manager of a team, the cycling team. You're then looking at other sports like rowing and, as I mentioned above, the sailing. So it's not just, rowing is an endurance sport, but that 6 minutes is kind of right on that, where it's still aerobic, but there's still so much power in threshold in rowing. And then you got the America's Cup sailing team and all the grinders. So you're mixing up the science of all the sports. Does that keep it kind of fresh for you then, that it's not only triathlon and endurance sport?
Yeah, for sure. And also, one thing I didn't mention, I'm also the lead physiologist for the women's kayak Olympic team presently as well. So, yeah. So, all in up, yeah, I have been across a lot of sports. It's quite funny. There was a period of time when I was working at for the New Zealand rowing team. My wife was working for the New Zealand Breakers basketball team as head of marketing. And then my wife's brother is Grant Elliott, who's was a professional cricketer. And he was like the guy who basically knocked South Africa out of the World Cup. And New Zealand went to the finals a few years ago. So there's a period of time when I was like, yeah, we've got all the big sports covered here.
I love it. I love it. That's fantastic. And you mentioned Professor Paul Lawson. I all my years training with Simon Whitfield. I think they were very close, if I remember, because I remember the name, and I remember Simon referring or using him. Was it for the 2008 Olympics? Were they working together?
Yeah. So there's a bit of a funny connection there. So Paul's wife is the cousin of Simon Whitfield's wife.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah,
that's what it was then.
I think that's the connection. There's definitely some.
I've heard the name, and I knew there was something there, but because it was. I think I've heard of some of his work as well. Just intermittently over the last 10 years of your own kind of research that you do, and I think I've seen his name. But it was one of those names that I kind of mentioned with Simon. What I want to do now is, I want to talk about 2018 real quick before we go into the heavy details of everything that you know. Take us through that 2018 season, because I had Terenzo Bozzone here a few weeks ago, and he said it was all his doing, the fact that you had an amazing race there and won the age group championships at the Kona Ironman.
Yeah, I listened to that.
He said it had...
Yeah, I know. Yes, I heard he said that I always take credit for his performance, which definitely isn't true. But yeah, I heard that. Well, he is now the he's probably got the title of the best training partner in the world now. He could probably start charging a high fee for his.
That's what I said. Yeah. I mean, because he trained with Macca in 2010 to his win, and then he trained Jan Frodeno in 2016 to his win. He trained you to the unbelievable age group world record in Kona. I agree. I think, Terenzo, if you're listening, mate, I think you got to start charging more, mate, for these records.
Exactly.
But tell me about that year.
Yeah, so where to begin? So I'll wind the clock back even more than that. So 2015, I did Kona for the first ever time. And there were people who might have been in 2015. It was stiflingly hot, like ridiculously hot. And I've been in Kona quite a bit now, and this was a very, very hot day. And if you look at all the run times of that, the run times were super slow, like much more. If you look at like the trends of times, they were a lot slower that year than any other year. And I did it, and I did 9 hours and 8 minutes that time when I first did it. But there was something in me then. I was like, I said to him, call my dad, and me and him are really close still, and we often talk on the phone about these sorts of things. And I'm like, I really think that I could win the age group in this race, just looking at the times that these people did, knowing how my prep was. I was away, it was 2015, and I was with the rowing team at that time, so it was really hard for me to train because I'd be traveling for 4 months of the year in Europe with the rowing team, really bad swimming and not really hard to get some consistent training in. So I was kind of pleased with that, and so I thought, okay, right, I really want to make a concerted effort to try and win the age group at Kona. So 2017, I was thinking, right, I'm gonna have a good crack this year. But lo and behold, we had the birth of our daughter. So my wife got pregnant, and that kind of
how did that happen?
Yeah, exactly.
My wife got pregnant.
Yeah, I was like, oops. No, it was definitely planned. But but you never know when it's going to happen, right? So we were trying, and then boom, so it happened, and I had already entered Ironman New Zealand, and it was a very windy day, and I qualified for Kona. And people knew, like all my friends knew that I was that I wanted to go to Kona, but it was at the time it was prior to 12 weeks, so you don't really want to tell too many people at that stage. So I didn't take my slot, and everyone was like, "Oh, why is he not taking his slot? Oh yeah, what's going on?" I reckon even then some people, like my closest friends, were onto us at that point, that they knew that something, maybe Kate was pregnant. So but lo and behold, Bella, who's my eldest now, she was born on the race day in 2017. Yeah, on race day itself. Yeah. So yeah. So,
I love that.
Yeah,
it's so great. So it was a wise decision to stay at home.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it was never going to be it was never a decision really, because it was always going to be too close. No. But yeah, I remember, and that was a year when Terenzo had his. I mean, I'd been working with Terenzo up until that point, and he came sick. So I had like Bella with a newborn baby on that day, watching Kona in the hospital on my laptop. As you do, because you've got to get all the important things done at that time.
Yeah. Can you keep it quiet over there? I'm watching Kona.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that was so that's kind of brings us up to 2017, and then. All these things, like you imagine now, I've got a newborn, 1-year-old, and Kate, my wife, she knew that this was always something that I wanted to do, and she was massively supportive. And she's, if you want to have another go next year, you can, we'll do it together. It's a commitment between all of us, and you do your best and you give it your all and train up for it. So that was kind of the plan, and we even gave Bella a Hawaiian middle name as well. So her middle name's Kailani, which is sea and the stars in Hawaiian, which is kind of. So I really think she's a massive good look. I mean, everything's very superstitious when it comes to Hawaii, but I do think she's my good luck symbol now. So Yeah. So I trained up for 2018 and went to Ironman New Zealand, which was in March where I got my slot, and I did 8:35, which was the age group record at the time, and it still is the age group record. So that was a good race. I ran a 2:52, and I kind of like, oh yeah, that's pretty good. And then and it was a really good build-up because Jan Van Berkel came over to New Zealand. So me, Terenzo, and Jan were all kind of training together in New Zealand. Mm. Terenzo won. He had that race of his life. Jan came fifth or maybe fourth. He also had a really good race, and we were all on a super buzz. And me and Terenzo were, I was coaching him. We were training together, and it was just such a good vibe. And when you actually train when you're coaching someone, in some ways it's a really beneficial relationship because you can just feel the way, if they're tired or not, just from the way they're warming up and just from the way that they're pedaling. And I could always tell if Terenzo's starting to feel the pinch, because I see him, he's a bit, I can tell literally from the way he answers the phone half the time, So it's like, hey, Teen. He's like, oh, I'm done. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So
love that. Well, on that, there's very few coaches in the world that can probably go train with their professional athletes that they're working with. So I think it's great that you've got that ability, but I don't think there's many coaches that could actually. I don't know that Brett Sutton or that would be coaching, training alongside their athletes all the way.
Yeah, that's a good point. But where you can, it is definitely it definitely helps. And then me and Terenzo went to Kona in May. Yeah, we went in May, and he had a great build-up block. I got injured, which actually turned out to be a stress fracture in my sacrum, believe it or not. Oh. And I didn't even realize.
Pretty common. That's common on this show, by the way. I feel like every second guest has this.
yeah, crazy. So I was just cycling at the time, and I missed a load of running. But then, of course, Terenzo, we came back. We did Ironman Cairns. I didn't do that race because I was injured with my stress fracture in my sacrum, not knowing what it was, continually trying to run on it and making it worse. But and then Terenzo had his accident, so that kind of really put a roadblock in us training together, and that completely shook me to the core. It's so close to home. Like it was seeing him every day. I was actually supposed to be going out with him because he was doing some aero testing, and we were talking on the phone, and he came around to my house because I lent him like a skin suit to test. But I ended up not going out with him because I was busy at work, and I said to him at the time, I said, just wait till the weekend and we'll do it together. But he was adamant that he wanted to do it on that day. And that kind of derailed at least me and him for a while. But he was actually back on the horse pretty quick. But we went back out to Kona together for another good build in September. And I think when we were out there, it was pretty apparent that Kona wouldn't be happening for him that year. So and then as he said in your podcast, he then turned into my training hack. So which is so yeah. And I just had the most brilliant build, apart from the injury, the stress fracture, stress fracture injury. I couldn't really complain. But in some ways, I think every misfortune, it really does present an opportunity, and from that, my cycling really improved. And and I think it was probably maybe in some ways a good thing. I think you got to make the most of every downfall. You can always make the most of it. So so that was good in that regard.
I mean, it's the beauty of the sport, isn't it? The three sports. It's kind of, it gives you the opportunity. You can always swim. You can always do the bike. I mean, a lot of injuries tend to be on the running. So it is nice that you can pick it up on the swim bike. And then take me through race day. What were your splits? And I know it was a pretty quick year, but you certainly optimized the fast year. So just tell me about the actual day, and then we'll get into a bit more knowledge-based stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So just before we get into the race day, with that stress, with the sacrum stress fracture, which comes back to the race, I actually never found out what that was until I kind of had some continuous back pain and a little bit of stiffness around the glutes, and I ended up getting like a scan on my back, and then the day before the race, my doctor. Matt Brick, if you know who he is, Matt Brick, the duathlete, he's also a friend, and he's a surgeon, and he organised me to have a scan, and he goes, I know why you've been getting that pain in your butt. It's like, oh yeah, why is that? He goes, oh, you've got a healing stress fracture in your sacrum. So if you feel anything click tomorrow, sit down, don't move.
Oh, that's what you got in the back of your mind the whole race.
Well, yeah, exactly. So that's how that came out. But yeah, so that's what I did. I actually didn't think about it the whole day until my friend came alongside me and on the like about 8K to go with the run. He goes, how's the butt? I was like, well, I hadn't thought about it until now, but feels all right. Thank you. So
yeah, you bastard.
Yeah, exactly. So race day itself, it was a quick year, but I had a bit of a conservative swim. My swimming's always my weakest. That's the thing that I definitely cannot keep up with. The Yans and the T's of the world. They're just this was powering past me, and I did a 54-minute swim, and then on the bike, I think it was 4:32. And then the marathon was a 250 marathon, which was the 5th fastest of the entire race, actually.
Wow. Mate, yeah. I love how your swimming's your weakness. 54 minutes, by the way, is for anybody. That's incredibly good swimming. Okay, yes, there's guys going under 50 minutes, but very few. Some of the best professionals. A 4:32 bike, so you're averaging that 40K an hour. Just absolutely incredible. And then to drop a 250 marathon, it's one thing. Kona, there's something unique about it, and you touched on it earlier. There's something about Kona, and I think we're all still trying to understand what it is. And you're the sports scientist, you can tell me. And Mark Allen might put it. You got to say your prayers to Queen. What is it? Queen Kamalama or whatever it's called, or whoever, the island. It's a unique place, but very few people can really lay down fast marathons. I mean, were you on track that whole run for a 250?
Yeah, I was. I mean, I'll send you my splits. It was like, I can't actually remember the exact, but it was like I ran like a 38-minute 10K, a 41, which was at Palani, then a 39, and then a 40 or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, it was back to back. I was super flat, and I actually did some analysis and. So I kind of put because I was just I was looking at some data and you can get the splits from the pros because they all have their splits on the way. Then I had my splits from my stopwatch, which is obviously there's a bit of a difference there. But I could rank my position all the way through, and then the last I think it was like 5K. It was only Patrick Langer who was running quicker than me because I obviously didn't slow down. I just kept on going at the same pace. So. Yeah, I was actually running it was only for the last little bit. I was one of the fastest runners on the course for the last 5K-ish. So yeah.
Well done, mate. Congratulations. It really was fantastic. So what I want to do now is break down how we did all of this, because I think what I love about your story is the self-experimenter. The ability to know the science, have a little bit of an athletic background, but then be able to use all the science that you've learned and put it into practice. So where do I start? Your doctorate was in heart rate variability, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about that and what that actually means? Because there's a number of listeners that aren't endurance athletes that might be just sort of listening to optimize their own health and longevity. What are we talking about when we talk about heart rate variability?
Yeah. So heart rate variability. It's a measure of the autonomic nervous system. So the autonomic nervous system, it's broken into 2 parts. You have your sympathetic side, which is kind of your more your stress, your fight or flight response, if you like. And then the other side is your what's called the parasympathetic side, known as rest and digest, kind of the relaxation and the recovery side. And the two work in combination with each other, whereas if you're highly parasympathetic, you're lower on the sympathetic. So you and me now, we will be predominantly, unless we've just done some high intensity interval training or something that's quite stressful, we should be predominantly parasympathetic and relaxed in our state. Whereas when we exercise, we have lack of sleep, we get highly stressed at work, we shift more of this sympathetic fight or flight stress response. And what heart rate variability does is it's trying to ascertain which side you're most, or you're, it's not actually trying to, you can't measure your sympathetic side, but it's trying to measure your parasympathetic side. And it's assumed that if parasympathetic activity is low, sympathetic activity is high. And the way it does that is it's basically measuring the variation in your heartbeat. So you or me sat here right now, Greg, and say our heart rate 60, which, you know, fit athletes like us is never going to happen. We'll be in the 30s at least, of course. But you know, it's not going to be
once upon a time.
Yeah, once upon a time. Yeah. It's not what the gap between each heartbeat is not it's not a second. It's a varied heartbeat. So might be a 1 second, then half a second, then 3/4 of a second, and, you know, 1.2 seconds. And it's kind of varying all the time. And that in essence is what you're measuring when you're looking at heart rate variability. And more heart rate variability is associated with more parasympathetic activity, rest and digest, whereas less heart rate variability is associated with sympathetic stress, like fight or flight stress response. So, and heart rate variability was originally researched more in health, for health populations rather than athletes, because it's generally known that healthier people have higher heart rate variability, higher parasympathetic activity, and are generally less stressed. But my PhD focused on how you can use heart rate variability tracking to optimize training adaptation, whether you're adapting negatively to a training load or you're adapting positively to a training load, and how you can then adjust training accordingly to meet that.
Fascinating. And so you can, I guess these days they've come a long way with how you can test. I think there's apps and things that you can now download on your phone, and you can test it. And you could then wake up in the morning and go, "Oh, look, I'm way too sympathetic today. My heart rate heart rate variability is just not. It's too minimal. It needs to be a bigger range." Is that it? You can kind of go, okay, or what kind of workout I should do today? Maybe if I'm it kind of indicates if you're well rested, right? And if you can do a higher intensity workout or not.
Exactly. So there's been a number of heart variability guided training studies now. And so the heart variability guided training studies, they do just that. They say, okay, if there'll either be a standard deviation above your normal or a standard deviation below your normal. And they say if it's a standard deviation below, and you've got low heart variability, I'm going to do low intensity training. Whereas if it's above, I'm going to do high intensity training. And that's basically heart variability guided training. And I've actually just been part of a review. So we've just published a paper that was that pulled all of the heart variability guided training studies together to see if heart variability guided training is a better way to improve purely VO2 max. And, you know, that systematic review showed that it is likely better than normal, like, block periodization training. So it does seem to be effective, and that's one way to do it. But typically in my own athletes, I look more at trends over time. So I look at more 10-day rolling averages so if they're doing a hard training block and they seem to be responding to that training block and they're coping in a functional way, you'll generally see increases in heart rate variability. But if it's over that rolling average, so you look at like a 7-day or a 10-day rolling average, and you'll expect that to be climbing if they're kind of coping well. And then as they rest and recover, you usually see it come back down to kind of their normal baseline level. So it's kind of this waving response when they're training well. So you get up and down periods as you go through training cycles. But if you have a period where it's coming down and you're in a high training load period and the heart rate variability is coming down gradually over time, then that is the point where, okay, something's not right here. Something's going wrong with the training. I'll maybe look at the training intensity distribution. Are they doing their easy sessions a little bit too hard? What's the sleep like? What's the diet like? What's the overall day-to-day stress like? Because 9 times out of 10, I can look at the training and I'll be like, hang on a minute, this just doesn't make sense. And they go, oh yeah, I moved house last week. You know, that sort of thing. That's the great thing about it. It's very, very global. So with training peaks and these training stress balance and autonomic and acute training loads, they're hopeless because you have no external input at all, because it doesn't know if you're moving house. It's just saying, oh, your training load's this, therefore you must be this. but it doesn't know what's going on with the sleep, doesn't know what's going on with nutrition, doesn't know if they're having trouble with their partner, if they're moving house, if they've got exams. And that's the really great thing about heart rate variability. And it has been shown, the research has now shown time and time again that the state that you present yourself to a training session, and that can be your heart rate variability, that can be your motivation, that can be your how willing you are to do that session, how excited you are to do that session, affects the way you adapt to that training session. And that's really important thing to consider, because you're getting literally more bang for your buck. If you're ready to do a session and you're happy, you're motivated, then you're actually getting more training adaptation from it. And that's what you kind of look for when you're really trying to optimize that each and every training session.
I love that. It was funny when I had I think mutual friend of ours, Dr. Tommy Wood. I think you mentioned that you when we were before this show, we know, and you've done some work with him. But basically, when I asked him, because I'm a huge advocate for visualizing and really passion, and being in the right headspace before certain training, or even if I'm just visualizing on a massage table, and I asked him, does visualizing kind of work? What do you think? And he said, what we think has a direct impact on our physiology. And kind of what you're saying is bringing that attitude, that mindset to training, but we can actually see that mindset is affected by heart rate variability. It's kind of like the chicken or the egg, I guess. Like, how much can we actually, if our heart rate variability is not where we want to have it before a workout, how much can we do it through just mindset management? Is that possible?
I mean, you can definitely affect your heart rate variability mainly through breathing, to be honest with you, rather than, and that's why a lot of a lot of meditation, it enhances heart rate variability, it enhances your parasympathetic activity, largely because of the breath. So when you breathe, what happens is when you exhale, you're exerting parasympathetic flow onto the heart and onto other receptors, which is slowing down your heart rate. Which is why if you ever purposely look at your resting heart rate and you breathe in and then you do longer exhales, you'll naturally see it come down. So you can do that, but to me, that's a bit more of a quick fix. It's an acute fix, and it doesn't. I don't think that's really going to affect the training. I mean, no one's really done that. Maybe it might be a study that someone could do. If someone is presenting quite stressed, they can do some relaxation, some exercises to really bring down that heart rate, and then do the exercise. But I'm not sure whether that would be the case, really. But yeah, it's an interesting one to consider. I'm just reading a book at the moment called Breathe by James Nestor. I don't know if you've read that book. If not, I would highly recommend you get it. It's all about basically the power of breath, nose breathing, and all the ailments that breathing can cure, and how important it is to breathe properly, and how as humans we're just really, really bad breathers. And it's a great book. I definitely recommend it. But it kind of goes into that the whole cycle of breathing and how it affects the autonomic nervous system, and how one of the things I just recently read in this book is he talked about the inhale and the exhale, and how many mantras in prayer they force you into a longer exhale, which increases your parasympathetic activity, which is why, this healing power of prayer may actually be somewhat true, because the mantra of prayer is forcing you to reset your autonomic nervous system and set yourself into more of a kind of a healing and restorative process, which I found pretty fascinating.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. It's kind of like a prayer, or the art of practicing gratefulness, or whatever it is that you need, but combining that with the breathing, and that it actually has a physiological response. I think it's fascinating. And you mentioned obviously sleep and nutrition. I want to kind of dive into those a little bit, because I think you're incredible with understanding the low carb, high fat world that we tend to be hearing more and more about, especially endurance sport, but I'm also curious about it for the everyday layman. there's no doubt the science that seems to be out there that carbohydrates, we seem to have overdone them the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah, yeah.
And even when I had Dave Scott on and he's like, oh, I just want to put it out there. I was wrong, throughout the 80s and 90s, preaching to everybody. And we were laughing about, the big carbohydrate parties before the races.
Yeah, everyone loves the pasta party, hey. Oh, yeah.
But I mean, you've now self-experimented and you've worked a lot with a lot of athletes. You have your courses on endureIQ that coaches and athletes can take to educate themselves on this low-carb, high-fat diet. Can you tell me, let's start with something very simple. When you talk about a low-carb, high-fat diet for just a layman, somebody that's maybe working out a little bit, what kind of a day does that look like? And do you encourage that for a layman, or is it only for endurance athletes?
Yeah, so I'll start by we call it the low carb healthy fat diet, because that's a very important thing to realize. It's not like low carb healthy fat. That doesn't mean you go to the fish and chip shop and fry your fish and think you're smashing the high fat, right? So that's
you ruined everything, mate. You just ruined it.
Yeah. So we'll start with that. That disclaimer.
I got it.
So I guess there's when it comes to low carb diets, there's a bit of a scale, really. So you can go from what's more known as a ketogenic diet, and then you come up in your amount of carbs and to more of a low carb, high fat diet. So ketogenic is generally considered to be less than 50 grams of carbohydrates per day, whereas low carb is considered to be more 100 to even 150 grams of carbohydrates per day, which is still, that's a reasonable, it's a lot more than 50, and that's why I'm more of a fan of low carb than ketogenic for athletes specifically, because it's more maintainable. It's quite easy to keep your carbs at 150 per day if you're a little bit conscious of it. So that's the difference. And obviously you're looking at then the rest of your macronutrient intake. If your carbs are kept at that constant, then the rest is coming from basically protein and fat as the other macronutrients. And so there's some people believe, like if you read the research in ketogenics, protein should be kept to a regulated amount due to something called gluconeogenesis, where you're basically making carbohydrates from proteins. But my opinion is that shouldn't be the case with athletes, and you should ignore how much protein you're having, because that's the biggest mistake that I think most athletes make, is that people don't really understand ketogenic diets and low carb diets, and lots of the research is done in ketogenic diets specifically is to do with epilepsy and seizures. So they have to really be very, very severe, and also with people with insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes. So they have to be more severe. But when you're deciding where you should be on that kind of scale, it's totally individual. So someone who's like a type 2 diabetic, got insulin resistance, has very high fasted blood glucose, so anything basically 5.5 above, they're probably people who need to be quite low. But athletes generally don't need to be that low, because one is they're exercising a lot, so glucose disposal is much, much higher than a sedentary person, but also they are using it a little bit more. So so you're looking at being a little bit more cyclical in kind of your periodization of where you're titrating those carbs into the diet.
A quick mini break. I really want to encourage you to do something special for yourself and sign up to Athletic Greens and get a free year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase by visiting athleticgreens.com/Greg. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Greg. I experimented a lot when I was just, when I turned 40 and I was still racing professionally, and I was like, okay, I'll give some of this longer stuff a go, and start doing some 70.3s and Ironman. And I didn't have your science background by any means. And I was kind of doing my own research and listening to a sponsor I had at the time, which basically was still preaching a fairly high carbohydrate diet. Yeah. And my Ironmans were pitiful, mate. I think I did 2 of them. I did Melbourne and then I did Kona. But
did you ever have your fat metabolism measured?
No, I never did any of that. I was actually quite lazy when it came to the science. I was a bit of the 80s, 90s where hard work is the only thing that matters still. And I mean, that's not all true, but I definitely had a bit of a mindset, just go train harder and harder and longer. But I did start experimenting more and more, especially sort of my final year and then a year or two after, as I just kept training, about, doing a lot of exercise where I wasn't eating. I'd just go on water. I could go for 5-hour bikes, ride 140, 150K through the mountains of Boulder. And I felt fantastic. And I found that year after year, I got better at doing it, right? It didn't happen quickly. I didn't suddenly become a fat metabolizer quickly, but I learned. But the problem I had there, I still had competitions, Olympic distance races. And so I was still kind of going, okay, I need to go down and do an intense workout, whether that be, 10 by 3 minutes or whatever. And I really found that my body wouldn't let me go. It wouldn't let me shift gear. It wanted me to stay in that complete aerobic state. It was like I couldn't force the pace. So then I started to have to add little bits of carbohydrate, either that night before or the morning of. And I guess what I'm saying is I was kind of doing intermittent fasting. I was trying to focus on the fat, but I never had it completely managed. So how do you work with individual athletes in terms of managing their day-to-day? If they're going to do, one day is going to be higher intensity, another day is going to be endurance. Is this, you just kind of work with each athlete kind of going, you need to have a bit more carbs on this day and compared to another day, or do you just keep it the same the whole time?
Yeah, well, I guess like with endureIQ, as you mentioned, we got that, LDT 101, which is a low carb course. And, one of the main why I was inspired to kind of do that course is because of that, what you just talked about, is that so many people try and do a low carb diet, but everyone does it wrong. And that's why I'm like, I'm like, geez, I need to, and it's not like, I don't sit and say like, you must do a low carb diet and this is definitely the best diet for every single athlete. And I don't believe that to be the case at all. But if you're someone who struggles with finishing, you're bonking a lot. There's 3 major things that are problems with triathletes. Is one is they bonk, they hit the wall. 2 is many have massive gastrointestinal distresses because they're having to shovel too much carbohydrates to meet the demands because their fat metabolism is so low. So the only way they can get around that is try and take 90 grams of carbs per hour, and then they can't take it because they can't take the fructose and they have a really sore stomach. And also they tend to train all the time and still not be very lean, so they're the 3 things. And that's where, and that's the kind of what I was hoping to do answer with the course and help people navigate their way around to get to answer those questions for people, because they're very, very common. But to answer that question, it's, the main thing that I find with someone who, like, where you're presenting what you're saying is that, you're finding the top end is hard. Often it's generally lack of overall energy balance. Because what many people do, as you alluded to, is they try and double dip, so to speak. They go low on the carb and they fast. So being low on the carb, you're generally more ketogenic. Ketones are an appetite suppressor, which is why many people lose weight on a ketogenic diet, because they just eat less. But then also you're then not eating. So then you're in this massive negative energy balance. And we know in males that if you're more than 400 calories in deficit per day, which is super easy to do. You imagine if you don't eat until midday and you've done like a long ride, that's very, very hard to then catch up. So then you have reductions in testosterone, you have reductions in all those other functions that are really important for high intensity exercise. And that's the main reason why I see people struggling with the high end more than anything. And it's more to do with that overall energy balance. And it's even with the same with the keto flu. We've got a student at our university who showed that very thing. People who have the keto flu, it's nothing to do with ketones or ketone levels. It's all to do with energy balance and how much, how many calories they have on and how much energy they're using. If they're in a massive calorie deficit, no wonder you generally feel pretty not that great, right? So
Yeah, fascinating. What do you think? I've had a couple of people on, and I think I'm going to discuss with Tommy Wood in the next couple of weeks, Dr. Tommy Wood, a little bit more about looking at the specifics of sort of the DNA, genetics, and ancestral health. I had a doctor on by the name of Dr. Ara Sapaya, and a fascinating guy, actually. If you want to listen to an interesting episode, his journey to where he is very entertaining. Anyway, we were discussing sort of nutrition and things, and he was sort of saying, look, I'm from Malaysia, and my ancestors are from India. And he says, I tend to feel better on a carbohydrate diet compared to maybe a Scandinavian that might feel better on a higher fat diet. So now we're kind of talking about individuals to the next level, looking at our ancestors and our DNA and genetics. What are your thoughts on all of that, when we're working with individuals?
Yeah, for sure. Well, just whilst you're on the subject of Tommy Wood as well, you should ask him about the paper he wrote on high intensity interval training and ketosis, because he wrote a paper that was by it was entitled "Loss of Machinery in Ketosis." Maybe we're looking in the wrong place. And he explains that there's this idea that we're losing enzymes like PFK to that are down-regulating our ability to use glycolysis. But he wrote this great little piece that says no, because we're down-regulating in some places, but we're up-regulating in other places that are helping that very matter. So he'll be able to talk to that and help you with that as well. So that's really good. But just
perfect. I'm always texting him all these random questions. By the way, he's like my go-to guy. I'm like, hang on, what about this? What about this? I think he's probably sick of me, but I said, look, you're my man. You're on my show here, so you got to keep.
Yeah, exactly. But the on the ancestral health, like I think. I really do not believe that one diet fits all. And even when it comes to low carbohydrate diets, I always, in endureIQ, in our course, we say a sweet spot, because everyone is a little bit different in what suits them. We talked about, from 50 to maybe 150 or more. So it's about kind of bringing your carbohydrates down, building up your ability to build ketones and use fats, and then building the carbohydrates back up a little bit until you find your own point, your own personal sweet spot. And of course, if you look at the data and look at there was actually a really good paper that was done that kind of looked at Mediterranean diets, low carb diets, low fat diets, and it said, and it looked at, okay, if we take a group of people, how many of them are responding positively to this diet? And there's a wide range, right? And some people respond negatively, some people respond positively to all diets. But generally, this paper showed that most people respond positively to a diet lower in carbohydrates. But of course, some people didn't. So that's where maybe that ancestral health stuff might come in a little bit. In there are differences in what people can take and backgrounds and things like that. So yeah, I mean, it's not. Go on, sorry.
I feel like we're just scratching the surface a lot on the DNA and the genetics. Is that what you think? I mean, I had Dr. Mansoor Mohammed on here, and he read my genetic profile out, which was a bit, I felt a bit vulnerable on that episode, but it was actually quite fascinating as he went through things. Where do you think we are on, genetics and the DNA and the science of it? And I guess on the second part to that question is, the more we know about our DNA and genetics and moving forward, do you think we start to lose a little bit of the play in sport, that we actually start to know too much?
Yeah. So, I mean, we had someone approach us. So my guy who works with me at Emirates Team New Zealand, Adam Story, he's his PhD in this area. And, we were approached by someone who was looking at doing like gene testing and trying to get some, to kind of titrate the training to suit individuals. And he's an expert in the area, and he was like, yeah, he doesn't really believe that we're there yet, and it's really hard to get the training to that level where you're actually or diet where we really have a full understanding of what to do. It's one thing reading it, but then it's another thing making doing the interventions or the behaviors that are actually going to affect it. Because I think we're pretty good at getting the information, but I don't think we're actually good at doing anything prescriptive with the information. So, and surprisingly or not, it even comes down to like training as well. Like you can have, because I always had this question when I was at rowing, like you could have someone who's doing a 2K performance, say 6 minutes, and you can look at the anaerobic and the aerobic contributions of two individuals. One could be 85% aerobic contribution and then a 15% anaerobic contribution. And then you could have someone who does the exact same time, but they're totally different, where you could have almost like, 65% aerobic and then the rest anaerobic. And, we don't even know what training is most suitable for those two people. Do you train the strength or do you train the weakness? No one's really answered that in the world of sports science. There's always been a question that I've had. The old adage is that obviously you train the weakness, but really, do you train the weakness? Because when it comes to anaerobic contributions, like it's actually quite hard to train. So you might be just flogging a dead horse when you're trying to train an aerobic guy with anaerobic training. And I had that experience with a girl that I was working with. She was in the women's pair. She actually got a silver medal at Rio. And, I tried so much to try and shift that anaerobic capacity, but it just didn't budge, and it's such an interesting thing. So when we don't even know that, I really question what we know about the interventions specifically with training when it comes to genes and that sort of thing.
That's fantastic. I love what you just said there, because I've always been a huge advocate my whole career of training to my strengths.
Yeah.
Right? I support my weaknesses. It's always been it. Really, really work on my strengths, but support my weaknesses. And if I can outsource weaknesses to somebody else, that's always what I'll do, because I feel like we're all experts. We all have something. God has given us all something and we should all be trying to optimize whatever that is to us. Personally in my athletic career, I always felt like, the bike came quite easily. Great. That doesn't mean I don't work it. That means I really amplify it and see if I can create some damage. The run was always my passion. So that was what I wanted to go do. So I amplified that. My swim was somewhat of a weakness, but I would do enough to be at the back of the first pack, right? That was always kind of the mindset. And it's interesting you talk about the athletes and how they break down but can still have the exact same performance, one being more aerobic and one being more anaerobic. Because I think when you look at athletes now, even when you hear certain athletes VO2s or whatever else, and yet they're still very, very similar. And I've interviewed a lot of athletes this year, and they're such a cross spectrum of athletes, and yet they all get the same results. So then how do you measure and change and adapt with an athlete? Because this now becomes the art of being a coach. And I guess let's go a bit more specific into the way you train a Terenzo Bozzone, a Jan Van Berkel, a Tim Van Berkel, Carol and Steffen. You're working with them all individually. How do you approach it? Are you looking at it going, look, you guys are all 8-hour athletes, 4 to 8 hour athletes. We're just going to lock down and focus on aerobic endurance all year? Or how do you break down the year for these people?
Well, the first thing I always do, this isn't just with Ironman, it's, this is the benefit of being involved in a number of different sports, because it always starts with the determinants of that event. And then, so like rowing versus kayaking versus sailing versus Ironman triathlon or versus Olympic distance triathlon, first you've got to really understand the physiology and really understand, okay, what is required to win or do well for that individual event. So for like the America's Cup sailing, for example, it's a bit like they're doing a cycling criterium. Really, they're doing like really, really short bouts of about 20 to 30 seconds of high anaerobic activity. Like, they're doing like 700 watts for that period of time. And then basically they've got about 2 minutes where they have to recover. So then you say, okay, so I've got, a lot of strengths involved because they've got to produce a high peak power. And we know that like bench press, for example, is massively related to peak power of the arms. And then I've got an anaerobic component where they've got to be able to sustain, but then they've also got to be really, really aerobic because they have to recover between bouts. So then immediately you've got 3 things that I say, okay, I've got 3 parts of my training program now that I know are absolutely key for me to really home in on and get right. Whereas in an Ironman, totally different. And Ironman is not about being faster. It's not about going faster. It's about doing things easier. Like, Greg, you would know, you can run the pace easily to run a 2:30 marathon. But the problem is, in an Ironman, you just couldn't do it easy enough. So you couldn't do it. And that's a completely different mindset. So then other parts of training come into it. So suddenly the aerobic threshold becomes a really key determinant. Economy becomes a really key important thing. And then also substrate use becomes a really important thing, because if you're producing X amounts of power and I say, okay, at 300 watts of power, you're 100% reliant on carbohydrate. Even at 90 grams, even if we shovel 90 grams of carbohydrate in you an hour, you're still going to run out of endogenous supplies. Then you say, okay, we need to work on this, we need to work on that. So yeah, the first step is that it comes into understanding the determinants of the event, and then understanding what the athlete is capable of, and then building training sessions that you believe really give you an idea that, yeah, this is what that athlete can, that athlete can do this. This should equate to that type of race performance. So, for example, 4 watts per kilo for an Ironman athlete is pretty much the price of entry for an elite male, right? So if you can't do 4 watts per kilo at a heart rate below your aerobic threshold, then there's no point even getting started. So that's the first thing you've got to kind of work on and think of. And if you're at 4 watts per kilo and you're burning like 98% carbohydrate, then that's also a problem. We've got to do something about that. So that's the kind of approach that I would generally take with it. Yeah.
Oh, I love all of that. And I love that you've got the different sports. So I don't know Kai Hurst, if you know him.
I listened to your podcast with him. Yeah,
fantastic that he's gone from the 3 sports, surf Ironman to Olympic swimmer to now working as a grinder on the America's Cup yacht. And I mean, just what an incredible athlete.
Yeah.
We finished that show and I asked him, have you been, tested or whatever? And he didn't have much to say on that. I'm sure the sports scientists have more on him, but he said, well, I do have a 10.2 lung capacity.
Yeah, right.
Like,
that's pretty high.
The average man is 6 liters, correct? Am I correct on that?
Yeah, around 6 liters, 6 or 7. Yeah, but it depends on the size of the male, right? Bigger men have bigger lungs, obviously. But that
was insane.
Yeah,
I was like, well, no wonder you dive under a wave and hold your breath for like a minute. Yeah, pop up the other side. I mean, I find all of that fascinating. And then, so for you, as you coach these various athletes, are you the physiologist in the background, or are you actually? I mean, you obviously with Terenzo, you're a hands-on coach and very involved. But with all these, with the rowing and the sailing, are you hands-on, or are you allowing others coach and you're doing the testing in the background?
Yeah, it's different for different things. So with rowing, I was very much more in the background, but I actually ended up running a lot of training sessions, particularly around the men's. I did a lot of training sessions for the men's pair who were gold. They were gold medalists in London and Rio. So I did a lot. As I started off more in the background, but over rowing, I kind of moved more and more into writing the actual training. But I would never go out. I would kind of help the coaches and write the training and give them a suggestion of what that should be. With kayak, I'm very much in the background, just doing the testing. I talk with the coach, and that's it. But then with the Emirates Team New Zealand, my title is head of physical performance, and that's really very much more of a coachy role. So I'm very hands-on. I'm there when they're not on the water. I'm there every day. See them. I run them through the session. Very much there with sometimes even with a stopwatch, encouraging, and it's really very coachy. So when they're out in the water, yesterday we went out in the water with them, and we're out from 10 in the morning till 6 at night, kind of just testing sails and whatnot, which is pretty crazy.
Wow.
But yeah, we have one of our grinders, Louis Sinclair, is from Oracle. So he used to train with Kai, and Louis was saying that they used to sometimes jump in off the boat, and Louis would put on full size scuba fins and sit on his feet and try and keep up.
I know. I mean, that's just it, isn't he? The guy is a fish in a water. Yeah. Absolutely insane. Yeah. And I think he said, even in the show, I was encouraging everybody to do swim training, the whole team. Have you had a chance to get on one of those foil yachts yet? Have you actually been on it?
I have. Yeah. So I went on so we've had 2 boats. We had the first boat, which is boat 1, which is kind of the more test boat, and I had to go with that. But we launched boat 2 a couple of weeks ago. So I haven't had a chance to get on that yet. But yeah, I went on the first one, and it's pretty unreal. You wouldn't believe how wet you get on those things. It's like you absolutely if it falls off its foils and the water comes in, you are just like up to your neck in water, literally. So
I mean, they're insane, right? It goes between 80 and 100k an hour when it's at top flight across the water.
Yeah, it's crazy. I can't give you exact speeds, or otherwise I'd have to hunt you down and kill you. But
I know. Well, I was asking Kai if I could get a ride. He said, "Greg, mate, the rest of the team that are on shore haven't even had a go yet." You know,
yeah.
I'm like, oh, damn it.
Yeah, it's really hard to get a ride. I mean, I'm fortunate because like my role, it requires me to understand what's going on and the requirements, and and you've got to be so strong, like, because if you catch it wrong. And you get a lot of hydraulic pressure, it can be really, really heavy. So you're talking like, two big, strong guys doing a lot of like, basically it'd be like you trying to having your bike in its biggest gear and being stationary and then trying to get it moving as quickly as you possibly could. It's that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah, much like the track cycling. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it's didn't they at one point have the grinders on bikes rather than grinding with their arms?
Yeah, they did. So Emirates Team New Zealand, we're like the defenders, right? So we're the current owners of the cup. And we won the cup I wasn't with them then, but so I say we.
San Francisco 7-1 or something, wasn't it?
They lost then.
Annihilation.
Yeah, they lost then, but then Bermuda is when we won. So the last American.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry. That's right. Yes.
Yeah, don't bring up the San Francisco one with a New Zealand. Yeah.
No, that was the one. They were ahead, right?
Yeah.
And they end up losing.
6 up, 6-0, and then lost.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah. So then in Bermuda, we New Zealand won, and that was when we had cyclists doing the grinding. Well, at the time, and they called themselves cyclaws. Yeah, cycling sailors, cyclaws. But yeah, and we had like so the story goes is that we have a couple of athletes who are still in the team and who are in the team then. We have Joe Sullivan, who was Olympic gold medalist at London for the men's double in rowing. So me and him are now, we've had this like eternal relationship. I worked with him there, and then now I'm working with the America's Cup. So we kind of got back together, which was pretty cool. And then also we had Simon van Veldhoven, who was a bronze medalist at London in the Kieran for the track cycling, who was obviously an absolute shoo-in for being a cyclor, but he's just made this amazing transition to now being a grinder with his arms. And he's like, it's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing, really, Greg. Like the thing that fascinates me is like someone like you or I have said, okay, Greg, what we're going to do is we're going to do 5 30-seconders max with 8 minutes recovery, right? And they'll be like, what is the point in that? You do your best and it'll be reasonably hard, but it wouldn't be that bad. But those guys are so fibrous and have this massive anaerobic capacity that absolutely debilitated, like, that absolutely crucifies them. And like the other day we did this session of 6:30. It was 5 30-seconders with 8 minutes recovery. And the rule is it's lactate tolerance. So it's like
so 8 minutes between each, like 30 seconds and then 8 minutes recovery. You're saying
8 minutes recovery, exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Go on. I'm just letting that really sink in. That's a lot of rest. But you're right.
You're like, you'd be like, what is going on? This is ridiculous, right? For a triathlete. But like, it's just like they have now I'm taking the lactates, and the lactates are at like 20s and 23, 20. Some of them the lactate meters is more than it breaks. It says too high when it goes over 25, and I had 3 guys who went over 25, and one of them
for perspective, everybody. Probably an endurance athlete is between 3 and 5, right? I mean, somewhere down around that much.
Yeah, around. I mean, you just couldn't produce because
we can't produce
you can't produce it because it's a byproduct of anaerobic glycolysis. So it's at the end of that of glycolysis. It spills out at the end, and because we don't have that system, that engine, that's that trait, we're all about oxidative phosphorylation. We just don't really produce lactate or have an anaerobic system that produce any type of power in that capacity, which is why we also would be really, really crappy at producing a lot of power over 30 seconds. So you'll always see that higher power over 30 seconds, if you did a relationship between power over 30 seconds and lactate, it's very, very close, because people who have higher lactates will have higher power as well. So but to finish the story, we did this session the other day, and someone like you and me will be like, that's hard, but absolutely just destroys them. And it's been a real learning for me to see that, like, to the point where I had one, like Simon, who's like the track cyclist. He does it and he goes, go get my bike. So I go get his bike. He goes quickly. So as I wheel him the bike, he just throws up on the floor and then he jumps on his bike and he's like, oh, and he's wobbling his way, trying to recover going down the car park, and he's dry wrenching as he's going down the car park. And then he kind of goes around the back of a chase boat, falls off his bike, and is on all fours, just like spewing on the floor. And it's like,
oh my God.
Yeah.
That's the thing. They can go there. They can go to that dark place, right? Whereas our bodies go, no.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
You just can't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw some video actually doing some homework for this, and they're all doing a lot of preseason. I mean, they've still got, is it next year?
It's in March.
It's still got a while.
Yeah, it's in March.
Yeah. But the video I watched was still, they had a long, long time to go. And I think you guys were just doing some early season testing.
Yes, right.
These guys were just like encouraging each other to just absolutely go to the limit. And I think you had them testing their 10-second ability, 30-second ability, and then a 4-minute time trial for these guys, which must feel like a marathon for somebody that produces that kind of lactate. That 4 minutes must be forever.
Yeah, so that was the early testing when we were actually trying to select people for the team, and I was trying to get a bit of a power continuum. So they also did a 10-minute, so you kind of got that curve that you could kind of, you get an idea of people's strengths and weaknesses. It was absolutely debilitating because at the time, I mean, coming from more of a cycling background, I was like, I know that's very achievable in cycling, but because they're so fibrous and so anaerobic, that the 4 minutes was so hard for them. Some of them literally were like they had rigor mortis; they could barely turn the handles over. So I actually ended up changing. I changed the testing now, but that was the idea of that. But I guess you live and you learn. Unfortunately, there were a few casualties.
The poor guys. They're still cursing your name, I'm sure. The idea of these monster men that can absolutely blow these machines apart for 10 to 30 seconds to then go, right, pace yourself for 4 minutes. So I actually watched that and I was like, hang on, because my brother, played professional rugby and he's not built like me at all. He's that, real athlete kind of go, tremendous speed, power, played on the wing.
Right, okay.
Agility, the true athlete. I became the endurance guy, and I love my sport of triathlon, so I'm not bagging triathlon. I feel very fortunate and grateful for what I had, but I always kind of wanted to be that kind of athletic power kind of guy. My brother got all of it and I got all the endurance stuff. So I got very used to watching that. I used to love racing him around the block, because I knew I could get him over a 1K run, but anything basically, south of a 1K run, he definitely had my measure, that kind of even up to 1 minute. But when he blew. Yeah, like they seriously can't take a step.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. It's a full on blow, isn't it? Is your brother living in Cambridge now? Did you mention on the?
Yeah. My brother's down in Cambridge. He's a chaplain at St. Peter's.
Wow.
The private school.
Yeah, because that's where Rowing New Zealand's based in Cambridge, Lake Karapira. So I've spent many times there. My parents actually own a house there, so they're in the UK and they kind of do 6 months. So they have this internal summer, so they'll do 6 months in the UK and then 6 months in New Zealand. Everything's a bit mixed up at the moment with COVID, but
I know.
Yeah,
none of us are moving at the moment. I know. I haven't made it over there yet. I hope to, but all these kids are now, they've taken up cycling on the velodrome.
Yeah,
this school, everybody, St. Peter's in Cambridge, New Zealand. Quite remarkable.
Yeah.
There's velodrome that High Performance New Zealand also use, cycling velodrome in a school. I still can't get my head around it. Equestrian center, I think a golf driving range, do they? I don't know. And then the rowing, the river right there, and the head, High Performance New Zealand rowing, like you said, it's really quite extraordinary.
Yeah, it's a great spot for a bit of training. I mean, the roads. I mean, the New Zealand roads are really terrible, especially around Auckland. That's why me and Terenzo took a bit more mountain biking because the roads around Auckland are just diabolical. But Cambridge is actually really good. Like Cambridge has got great cycling. So and then you just got Rotorua. It's not far away either. You can easily do a day trip to Rotorua. So It's like
Yeah,
an hour and a half.
between you and Terenzo, I want to get over there, and we'll go, and my brother will all go do a Rotorua trip and some mountain biking, because that's Terenzo and I. Even though he was a triathlete, I think we spent half his episode talking about mountain biking. Because you guys had done that. You did that 100K with him, right? Did you did the whole 100K?
Yeah, I did. Yep, I did the whole. Yeah, so I beat him, by the way, just so you know.
Oh, did you? I'm not sure if you mentioned that in the episode. Did he?
He got a puncher. He got a puncher, and then he comes up to me at the end. He goes, "Ha! Look at my moving time. I still beat you." And I went, "No, you didn't. Not on the results."
That's right. That's right. He didn't know how to change a mountain bike tire or something.
Exactly.
He had the wrong inner tube or whatever. That's right. He was full of excuses. But
he's pretty.
All right, I got to come.
Go on. Sorry.
Keep going.
I was going to say he's pretty. He's pretty fearless. Pretty fearless, old Terenzo. Eh? Like, he took it up pretty. I mean, I'm just a scaredy cat. Like, so to put it into perspective, in that race, they had like one King of the Mountains section, and I was 79th overall, and but my downhilling is so crappy and diabolical. But on the one uphill, the longest King of the Mountains, I was 4th overall. So that puts into perspective the difference between my physical ability and my skill level.
But you haven't made much time on it. You guys have only just started mountain biking, haven't you?
Yeah, about 4 months ago.
Yeah, no, that'll come to you. Next time we get over to Boulder, I'll take you up to Winter Park, where we go do the downhills. And Terenzo couldn't believe that I was so lazy now that I enjoy the catching the chairlifts up and just riding down. But I said it's just a fantastic day.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
Fun to do with your mates. Don't think of it as training or exercise. It's just a fun day to go do the green, then the blue, and then maybe some black. And I mean, I wouldn't go up to a double black diamond or anything like that. If I can see the backside of a jump, I tend to feel a bit better about it, And if it's about a 1 meter drop off on the other side, I'm happy to let the bike free flow a little bit. But generally, you get better and better.
Yeah, geez. I don't know if I'm just grade 4. We don't know. I think like a black one would be grade 5 here. But yeah, I'm only happy with doing a grade 4. That's there's a lot of it was all single track at in Rotorua, but yeah, my motto of my technique of going downhill is I just grab a fistful of back brake and let it rip.
It's not a bad idea. I mean, keep your hands off the front brake. I mean, every crash I've had is because I've overdone the front brake. Yeah. Suddenly there's a tree in front of me and I've slammed the front brake, and I end up going plowing into the tree. I've had now we have 2 kids. I've got kids about the same age as you, actually. I think our daughter is maybe 2 months younger than yours.
Oh, cool.
Our little daughter, Sydney, was January 2018, and then we have a boy this year, January 2020.
Oh, we're very similar then. Yeah, because Jake just turned, my youngest has just turned 1. So we can share the pain of having 2 youngest. Like, whoa, it's definitely hard.
That's why the amount of people I've had on this show that talk about training and all these big miles, and I'm kind of like, yeah, this year's kind of been about just 45 minutes each morning, but otherwise it's hands on deck with the kids. And we've been on somewhat lockdown, just having a 10-month-old and a 2-year-old this year without COVID. We've basically been locked down anyway. So our life hasn't changed substantially.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll get the kids together. We'll share each other's pain, commiserate. I want to keep this show going a little bit though, because I do have a few more questions for you.
That's good.
To get sidetracked a little bit. What in terms of general health and overall well-being with your athletes, are you encouraging any kind of specific supplements, or are you measuring that on a regular basis to see what they need?
No, I mean, I don't really encourage supplements with my athletes. I mean, I kind of, I let them really take care of that themselves a lot of the time. I mean, I can share some of the supplements that I take myself personally. But most of them, it's hard because one is, especially with the pros, lots of these supplements are not from Informed Sports, so they're not batch tested. Which is, and I'm not saying, and that's not to say that they're going to be any of these supplements will be contaminated. But I always sit on the fence. So I don't want to be the person suggesting these things because
I don't blame you.
Yeah,
I don't blame you
because it's a little bit scary because you do hear some horror stories of that sort of thing. So I tend not to, and you'll be hard pressed to find good supplements that are also have gone through batch testing and Informed Sport. So I tend not to do that really.
All right. Well, what are you taking?
So I used to be a complete non-supplement taker, but now I take a few things. So I take I take resveratrol. So resveratrol is basically, it's from the root of a plant, and it's like an antioxidant. And it's supposed to, it helps with DNA repair and prevent DNA damage. And it's one of the supplements that really helps supposed to help with aging. So it's basically, you hear the benefits of red wine. It's because of resveratrol, but the amount of red wine you would have to drink to get the amount of resveratrol that's actually beneficial would definitely make the bad part of taking red wine. It'll be a little bit too much. So
yeah. How much is too much? How much is too much?
You're talking a couple of bottles a night, I think. So, So I take that. And I also take NMN, which is nicotine mononucleotide, which is also, it's a precursor it's an NAD booster. So NAD is, we can't survive our NAD. If we didn't have NAD in our body, we'd all just pretty much die. And it's one of the key enzymes that's associated with energy metabolism, specifically in the mitochondria. And that's also associated with DNA repair and protecting against DNA damage. And it's another age-related aging supplement. And it's supposed to, and both of these things are supposed to activate your sirtuins. And I don't know if you know what I've heard of sirtuins, but sirtuins are one of the main regulators in aging. So as I got older, I try and keep ever youthful, and it's all about cellular health. It's all about keeping your mitochondrial healthy, and they're the two things that I tend to take. And then also I'll take 2 probiotics, and then just a general multivit every day as well, which is I use Be Pure with the supplements that I use. So that's pretty much all the supplements that I take, which when you lay them out on a table, it's quite a lot.
I know. Well, it's funny. I'm a bit like you. I mean, I never took any supplements, right? And I only started doing it more so this last sort of 4 to 5 years. And again, like you, it was more about the aging and longevity side of things. So I'm fascinated to hear you say, what are you taking now? I mean, right now, I don't know. I'm taking omega-3s. I'm taking vitamin D. The science that seems to be coming out on vitamin D.
I also take vitamin D actually as well. So I take Metagenics, and I have it in a. So I actually really double down on that as well. So I'll take nearly 1 mil of that. And it's basically, it's high, specifically around COVID. And listening to Rhonda Patrick, she reckons.
I was going to say that's my reference tool there.
Yeah, she reckons that you can really go high on it, and you're absolutely fine. But I don't take it every single day. So I'll kind of like days when I'm out in the sun a lot, I won't take it. But if I have a day where I'm like inside all day, I'll take it. So I know I also take I do have the omega-3s as well, but I won't take that all the time, because I eat a lot of fish. We're fortunate to live in New Zealand, and we have great fish here. And Emirates Team New Zealand is next to this fish market that's absolutely outstanding. So we'll always have a really good, because literally the fish is coming in fresh every morning next to the building. So I'm like, well, I'm gonna have to go get some fish. So So I don't take it that regularly, but generally I will bring that in and out when I feel like I need it as well. But I just don't like it, because it really repeats. You can really taste that fish taste all day. I can't take it.
We got a really good brand that my wife is really the one that is, dives deep into all of this kind of stuff, and I kind of get it secondhand and then sound like the expert on this show. But basically, the stuff that she has is taking. I really haven't found it doesn't come back on me at all. The omegas.
Yeah, because my wife says it doesn't come back on her, but maybe it's just me. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Maybe your body's saying we don't need it.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. I know, it's fascinating. I mean, the vitamin D, the omega-3s. I started incorporating through. I think it was Dr. Tommy Wood who put me onto it. I can't remember, but magnesium glycinate at night, for my sleep, and I really found that one. I know when I take sort of the quantity that I take, I know that I get sort of a really heavy 5 to 6 hours sleep, which is great. And then I've been experimenting this year with magnesium threonate, during the day, and that one's also, it seems to light up my brain pretty well.
Oh,
So
really?
I've kind of,
I might have to give that a try. I mean, I haven't.
Yeah.
I did go through a phase of taking magnesium, and but I haven't really taken as much as it recently. I mean, anything that can. I mean, for athletes, right? I always think of like recovery as the three big pillars of recovery is your nutrition, like having a good wholesome diet, training periodization. So the way you place your sessions, whether it be making sure you're not doing back-to-back VO2 sessions and high intensity, and then also sleep. Those three things, if you can nail those three, you're going to be on a winner. But the sleep thing is the one.
It's not easy.
Yeah,
it's not easy. What, are you doing anything specific for your sleep? Because I've had to get, I went and got myself a cooling pad, and and all of that, and that has helped.
Yeah.
But I tend to be fairly, I don't know if it's kids or whatever, fairly high strung, and have to work a lot on my breathing, like you were talking about earlier, and that kind of thing. Are you a good sleeper? Do you have to worry about any of that?
I'm an okay sleeper. I reckon I've definitely got worse as I've got older. I mean, I do work in. I have some work in Europe a lot of the time, so I'll often have calls quite late, and that to me is the main bugbear of mine when it comes to poor sleep, because I really feel I need a good wind down at the end of the day. So I get up really, really early, so I'll generally be up at between 4:45 and 5 every day. So I try and get into bed between 8:30 and 9. It doesn't leave me much time. So if I've got a call at 7, and it might go on till 8 or 8:15, I don't have much time to unwind, and that's kind of the most important thing for me. But the thing that I find really, really helps me the most is a Shakti mat. Have you heard of a Shakti mat?
No.
Oh man, you're missing out. This is
did Terenzo mention that on his episode? What's it called? A Shakti mat? How do you spell that?
Shakti. Yeah. So basically, it's like a bed of nails, but you just lay on it. So it's like acupressure on your back, and that. Yeah. If I've got a lot in my mind and I'm really struggling to sleep, like last night was a prime example. I had a call that was late. I went to sleep. I couldn't. I have too much in my head, and I just lay down on the mat, and then and it just kind of just calms me, and then I'll just try to pull it out and roll to sleep, and that it really works.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's really good.
Go check that out.
And they're cheap for that. They're super cheap as well.
Yeah. Oh, well, that suits me even better.
Yeah, exactly. It suits everyone.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah. So give that a try.
Well, that's been I think we've covered a lot in this, and I know for the listeners, I know we sidetracked a little bit with some fun stories on the side there, but I think there's so many great, takeaways here. I'm thinking, in a year's time, I'm 50, and I'm thinking of doing some, getting back into some kind of endurance activity rather than just lifting heavy weights and trying to be big. But I'll have to tee something up with you, because I think you'd be a great guy to work with on sort of coming back into the sport after sort of what will be 6 years out. It'd be fun to sort of see what we can do, pick an Ironman or two, or do something silly. So I have to get back in touch with you in 6 months to a year away from my 50th, mate.
A big goal of mine. I've always wanted to do the race across America. So maybe me, you, and Terenzo, and we'll find someone else, maybe Chris McCormack, and we can make a ripper of a team up to do the race across America.
Yeah, that could be fun.
Yeah,
actually, there we go.
I'd love to do that. Mate, that's my aim.
Mate, right now, I just got back on the bike this last 2 weeks, and I've 35 minutes. My bum's already killing me. The idea of riding across America, I better start training now. But mate, this has been absolutely fantastic, and to hear that you had a late night last night, you got up early, and you're chatting to me this morning your time. I really, really appreciate it, Dan. This has been absolutely fantastic. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me on. It's been awesome.
Yeah. And look, for everybody that's enjoyed this show, you can find all the show notes and timestamps, the coupon codes, and all the links that Dan's mentioned throughout this show. Before you go, Dan, how can people best follow you or get in touch with you or do some of the courses that you're doing? Where do they find it?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm pretty active on the socials. So Instagram, which I think is at the Plews, unfortunately. And then, you can find endureIQ. So endureIQ.com that's where we have all our courses. We've also just launched an endureIQ training squad, which is kind of it's housed in today's plan, and it's sessions you can put. We have like rolling plans for northern southern hemisphere based athletes. You can pull in different sessions. They're scalable to your availability. And yeah, you can check it out, all that online. It's kind of like the next level of adjustable coaching and planning for anyone who's wants to rip it up in some long distance triathlon. So yeah, take a look on there.
Brilliant. Well, like I said, I'll put those all in the links. You can find those at bennettendurance.com/media. But mate, again, fantastic. Thank you everybody for listening. What an incredible episode, mate. Thanks so much, and stay on the line.
Thanks. Cheers, mate.
Thanks a lot for listening to Be With Champions. If you enjoyed the show, your support would truly be appreciated. You can visit the Be With Champions Patreon page, or you can subscribe with your podcast app of choice. Don't miss the next episode, so subscribe and be notified. For show notes, if you want to know more, please visit bennettendurance.com. I'm Phil Liggett, and on behalf of Greg Bennett, here's to the next time, and I hope you will join Greg again very soon.